Hi, this is Josh. You're listening to East Hearts Radio, and this is Talking with Josh Dean in Lockdown. Those of you that listen to the show regularly will already have a bit of an idea of what we're going to talk about on the show, who I am. But to just give those listeners who haven't heard the show before an idea of what we're about, my name is Josh. I've been a presenter with East Hearts Radio for probably coming up on a year now. And on my shows, we generally look at issues affecting local people, local issues, national issues. We sort of bring them in, we take a look at them, dissect them, and talk about what it's going to mean for people in our communities. And that's really what East Hearts Radio is about. It's a community radio station. We want to look at those issues that are going to affect local people. Me personally, I'm a community organiser and a campaigner in East Hearts. I got involved with East Hearts Radio through the youth campaigning that I do. I'm the co-founder of a non-profit organisation called Teen Voice UK. And basically what we do there is we campaign on issues that are relevant to young people, that affect young people. We've campaigned on all kinds of issues, particularly mental health awareness, but we've also looked at lowering the voting age to 16, and we've looked at reforming educational policy as well. And we've run a number of events, demonstrations, all kinds of things to sort of bring these youth issues forward, make them more relevant and more present for people so that young people can take action on them as well. Now, the format of the show has changed a little bit. Obviously, this has been brought about by the coronavirus lockdown. Generally, I would do my show in studio, but because of the lockdown, it's obviously not safe to travel, not safe to visit the studio. So what I've been doing is pre-recording my shows, more or less from the comfort of my own home, actually. So this is our third pre-recorded show going out. I record them the night before the show is played on the station, so that it's as up-to-date and as relevant as possible for those listening. And actually, it's been, as I've said on a few previous shows, been a very interesting experience. It has allowed me to present my show in a different way, do things differently, experiment a little bit more, and that's mainly because of the different types of software that we're using, because I am somewhat limited in the technology that I have access to. I don't have access to what we'd normally have in the studio, but I do have access to certain programs at home. So although, as I say, I am slightly limited, it's encouraged me to experiment, encouraged me to find new ways of doing things when it comes to putting the show together for you. So I'm hoping that if you are a regular listener, you're enjoying it, and I hope that if you're a new listener, we will be hopefully hooking you and will keep you listening going forward. To give you an idea of what we're going to be looking at today, as I say, the format's changed, so we are obviously looking at some more national issues as well as local. The big one is obviously the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown. Every week I try and come back to that, see where we are now, see what the big issues are that people in our communities are concerned about, and sort of try and bring together a local and national perspective and try and let the two of them inform each other. As always, I encourage people to get in touch and get involved. You can get in touch with us at East Hearts Radio, either on social media, so at East Hearts Radio, or you can send an email to studio@eastheartsradio.co.uk. You can always get in touch with me. I'm on social media at Josh Dean Hearts, Herts, like the county, or you can email me, josh@joshdean.uk. It'd be fantastic to hear from some more local people, hear what you've got to say on the issues we're going to talk about today, and any you might want to see on future shows. I've been really lucky to have conversations with people in the past already who have been interested in the issues we're talking about, who have got their thoughts they want to share on the issues that we're talking about, and who have questions or suggestions for what might be on the show in future as well. So do get in touch. It would be fantastic to hear from you. The issues that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to try and answer some questions as well as just looking at where we are. So in terms of the coronavirus and the lockdown, we're not just going to be looking at where we are at the moment, we're also going to answer some of the really complex and quite pressing questions that people in our communities are facing. The first one being, what is happening in our care homes? You might have seen some bits and pieces about this in the news. It's an issue I'm really concerned about. We're going to be talking about that on the show. The second, is it safe for your child to be going back to school? Is it safe for teachers to be back in school? We're going to be looking at that one as well. Lots in the press about this. Lots of pushback between the government and trade unions at the moment. We'll be looking at that one. Where are we as a result of the lockdown being loosened? Obviously, on last week's show, we talked about the loosening of the lockdown, the new measures that the Prime Minister has brought in. We're going to talk about where that's left us. And we're going to be talking about a petition from the East Herts Green Party to protect pedestrians and cyclists and ensure that they can socially distance appropriately and keep safe. So we'll be talking about that petition as well. I also want to look at updates on developments. We talked about some of these developments last week, Birchley Green and the gasworks. We're going to be looking at those again. We're going to be talking about consultations. We're going to be talking about the We Are Hertford campaign, how you can get involved. And I want to come back to those campaigns that I've talked about before as well, why I wrote to Julie Marson, the MP for Hertford and Stortford, about trans rights. And we're going to talk about International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, which was yesterday. And we're going to talk about the sort of national situation with that trans rights campaign, as I've spoken about before. So, without further ado, let's crack on with the show and let's look at what's going on with the coronavirus lockdown. So obviously on last week's show, we looked at the government's new message of stay alert, control the virus, save lives. We examined the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's speech, his address to the nation about the new measures and the new message being brought in. We looked at some of the reactions as well from Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland. We discussed what this means for local people, what this means for workers in particular. I was really concerned about what this meant for workers in construction, manufacturing industries and anyone else whose bosses deemed that they need to be in work. Obviously, the government's new message is if you can work from home, but if you can't, you should be encouraged to go into work. And we've seen that particularly in construction, particularly manufacturing and factories. The news had images last week of construction sites where people were not able to social distance because, frankly, it's an industry where, although you obviously can't work from home, it's incredibly hard to socially distance. And the absolutely packed trains, buses, other commuter services, it's really concerning. I was really worried this was going to happen, but I wasn't shocked when it did. The vagueness from the government, the lax advice, the weak supply of PPE and the poor guidance on social distancing in the workplace has not helped. And it's really worrying to see that already the R rate, the rate at which we pass on the virus, is slowly beginning to creep back up. So we obviously had an R rate of around 0.5 when the Prime Minister gave his address. I'm told now, looking at the information in front of me, it's between 0.7 and 1.0. We need to keep it below 1 in order to stay in control the virus. But we are seeing it creep back up. It is a real worry. And my own personal view is that we might find ourselves having to relax and contract the lockdown at various points. And I think we're heading for another contraction, a much stricter lockdown as that R rate creeps back up. I've talked about it before. I'm concerned about a second peak like we've seen in other countries. The Prime Minister has said the same. I'm worried that we might begin to see a second peak, but we'll keep our eye on the situation. Now, every week I take a look at Prime Minister's Questions, which is on Wednesday at midday, and I give you an update on what was said, what questions were answered, what questions were asked, and what it means for people living in the UK. So I'm going to play you a few brief clips from last week's Prime Minister's Questions, give you an idea of what was talked about, and hopefully it'll lead us on quite nicely to some of the next points and some of the next bits I'm going to talk about on the show. So, Prime Minister's Questions.
Mr. Speaker, in his speech on Sunday, the Prime Minister said that we need to rapidly reverse the awful epidemic in our care homes. But earlier this year, and until the 12th of March, the government's own official advice was, and I'm quoting from it, "It remains very unlikely that people receiving care in a care home will become infected." Yesterday's ONS figures showed that at least 40% of all deaths from COVID-19 were in care homes. Does the Prime Minister accept that the government was too slow to protect people in care homes?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't true that the advice said that. And actually,
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the overall figures given by the government at the press conference for those that have died from COVID-19 was 32,692, each one a tragedy. For many weeks, the government has compared the UK number against other countries. Last week, I showed the Prime Minister his own slide, showing that the UK now has the highest death total in Europe and second highest in the world. A version of this slide has been shown at the Number 10 press conference every day since the 30th of March. That's 7 weeks. Yesterday, the government stopped publishing the international comparison and the slide is gone. Why?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as he knows very well, the UK has been going through an unprecedented, once-in-a-century epidemic, and he seeks to make comparisons with other countries which I'm advised are premature.
Well, I'm baffled. It's not me seeking to draw the comparisons. These are the government slides that have been used for 7 weeks to reassure the public. And the problem with the Prime Minister's answer is it's pretty obvious that for 7 weeks, when we weren't the highest number in Europe, they were used for comparison purposes. As soon as we hit that unenviable place, they've been dropped. And last week, he quoted in defence Professor Spiegel-Halter. What Professor Spiegel-Halter said at the weekend was this, and we need to think about it. We should use other countries to try and learn why our numbers are so high. And so dropping the comparisons means dropping the learning, and that's the real risk. The ONS records the average number of deaths in care homes each month. For the last 5 years, the average for April has been just over 8,000. This year, the number of deaths in care homes for April was a staggering 26,000. That's 3 times the average, 18,000 additional deaths this April. Using the government's figures, only 8,000 are recorded as COVID deaths. That leaves 10,000 additional and unexplained care home deaths this April. Now, I know the government must have looked into this. So can the Prime Minister give us the government's views on these unexplained deaths?
Prime Minister.
Well, he's right to draw attention, as I've said, to the tragedy that has been taking place in care homes. The Office of National Statistics is responsible for producing the data that they have. The government has also produced data which not only shows that there has been, as I say, a terrible epidemic in care homes, but since the since the Care Homes Action Plan began, we are seeing an appreciable and substantial reduction, not just in the number of outbreaks, but also in the number of deaths. And I want to stress to the House and also to the country that solving the problem in care homes is going to be absolutely critical. Getting the R down, not just in care homes, but across the country, is going to be absolutely critical to our ability to move forward as a nation with the stepped programme that I announced on Sunday. We must fix it, and we will.
So, as with every week, very interesting, lots of important stuff being discussed. As I've said before, I think having less people in the chamber, in the House of Commons, makes it a more informative session. I've seen lots of headlines talking about the difference between Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, and Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson being a showman, and Keir Starmer being, that lawyer, that forensic lawyer. And I think it's to Boris Johnson's detriment that he doesn't have those jeering benches of Tory MPs behind him, because when he doesn't have an audience to play to, he doesn't seem to fare very well at all. There are a few points in there that I wanted to go back on that I'm concerned about. The first one is this, around care homes. Now, as you will have heard in those clips there, Keir Starmer asked Boris Johnson a very specific question about government guidance around care homes. Specifically, Keir Starmer said that in Boris Johnson's speech on last Sunday, the Prime Minister said that we need to rapidly reverse the awful epidemic in our care homes. Keir Starmer then went on to point out, but earlier this year and until March 12th, the government's own official advice was, it remains very unlikely that people receiving care in a care home will become infected. And the Prime Minister denied this, said no, it isn't true, so on and so forth. Keir Starmer later went on to pull the Prime Minister up on it in a letter in which he quoted the exact piece of government guidance, and it did, as he said in Prime Minister's Questions, say, it is therefore very unlikely that anyone receiving care in a care home or the community will become infected. The letter was copied to the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, And Keir Starmer essentially said something along the lines of, in this time of national crisis, more important than ever that government ministers are accurate with the information they give. Boris Johnson replied in another letter and basically said that he was selectively quoting government guidance and reminding the Leader of the Opposition that he promised to work constructively with the government in this crisis. Now, I want to go back on this for a number of reasons. The first one is that when the Leader of the Opposition understands and knows the government guidance on a crisis better than the sitting Prime Minister, I think we have cause to be concerned about who's running our country. The second is this. There is a really serious epidemic in care homes. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and it's really worrying. Now, in those clips, you also heard Keir Starmer ask Boris Johnson about the ONS figures for deaths in care homes. So the Office for National Statistics publishes the average number of deaths in care homes each month. And we've got to bear in mind that we're looking here not just at deaths in terms of during the coronavirus crisis, we're looking at average number of deaths year on year. So the average number of deaths in April has shot up by 18,000, as you heard in that clip there. But only 8,000 were recorded as coronavirus related, which means we've got a black hole of 10,000 deaths in our care homes that are unexplained. 10,000 unexplained deaths with very little indication of what caused them. Now, the likelihood is that some of them will be coronavirus related, but what's with all the others? And it's a very important question that has been asked here. And in this next clip, you'll be able to hear the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, ask the same question on the Andrew Marr show yesterday morning.
If you look at what the 26,000 deaths that were in April from the ONS figures, 18,000 of them are additional deaths from last year's figures. And therefore, we've seen also that the only ones that are related to COVID are 8,000. So there's 10,000 unaccounted for deaths within the care sector. There should be some investigation into that, and Keir Starmer has requested that, because every single death is tragic. And we've had medical experts, Andrew, who have said we seeded the virus into our care homes, and the guidance wasn't there for care workers. I think they've been tragically let down.
I'm really concerned about this, as I'm sure a lot of other people are. We already know that in our care homes we have an enormous problem with coronavirus in this country. The government were too slow to act in terms of care homes. They had that flawed advice up until the 12th of March saying that people in care homes were very unlikely to catch coronavirus and die. We now know that more than 40% of coronavirus-related deaths are in care homes. It has swept through the care sector. And for anyone who has elderly relatives, particularly elderly relatives in care, you'll be very, very concerned. Already you won't be able to see your relatives in care because of the lockdown that has been brought on visiting care homes. You're going to be even more concerned knowing that there's thousands of deaths as the coronavirus sweeps through. 10,000 unexplained deaths, a question the government has yet to answer as far as I'm aware. I've also talked recently about the situation in mental health hospitals, and I'm really concerned because in care homes, in mental health hospitals, we seem to be seeing this virus creeping up and sweeping through. The number of deaths, as I talked about last week, the number of deaths in mental health hospitals has doubled. And NHS England didn't want to post those statistics until the 2021 review. So my question is this: why is it that when we're looking at some of the most vulnerable people in our society, in care homes, in mental health hospitals, we're seeing such a sweep of this virus and we're seeing so many people die? I think there's a lot of really complicated questions that the government needs to answer here. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the answers, because I don't. I'm going to carry on researching these things. I'm going to carry on looking into them and also bringing to you as listeners what the government has said, what people in our local community are saying. But what I would say is be on the lookout, be aware of these things. It is really worrying, and I want to see some proper concrete answers coming forward next week. We obviously have the highest death toll in Europe, and we have the second highest death rate in the world from this virus. The only country in front of us, obviously, is America. I don't think we can look to, as Boris Johnson said recently, our apparent success, because there is none. I don't think we can look at this and say Britain has been in any way successful. Let's look at another country, for example. Let's look at New Zealand, where Jacinda Ardern is Prime Minister, who brought in the lockdown almost immediately to keep New Zealanders safe, and who said that she didn't want to pursue a herd immunity strategy like our government did, because she didn't want to let one New Zealander die from this virus in order to get herd immunity. That is a country who has succeeded in keeping their people safe. That is a country now, New Zealand, looking to begin opening up their economy again, with a really low infection rate, a really low death rate, whereas we've still got over 400 people dying in a day as of yesterday, and we're looking to open up our economy again. It's very, very worrying. I'm going to continue to look at this. I'm going to bring this back up next week, see if we get any more answers on the situation in care homes, see if we can get answers on mental health hospitals. This is one that particularly concerns me because of my mental health activism. And I'm going to find out who to write to, who the right person is to get in touch with, and I'm going to write to them. I'm going to write to them on behalf of all the people I know who are concerned about this and ask what is going on in our mental health hospitals as well. And we'll see if we can get some answers for you, for the people of East Herts as well. As I say, something we'll keep on top of, and we'll look at this again next week. Now, the next of these coronavirus-related issues that I wanted to look at, the next set of questions that I wanted to discuss and debate was, is it safe for students to go back to school? Is it safe for staff to go back to school? What is the government position? What's going on? We can't discuss this without looking at the 5 tests put forward by the National Education Union, the 5 tests they want the government to be able to fulfil before we send students back to school. Obviously, the government currently wants to start phasing a return of students, particularly at primary level, on the 1st of June. These are the 5 tests from the National Education Union they want us to be able to fulfil before we send our students back. Test 1. Much lower numbers of COVID-19 cases. The new case mount must be much lower than it is now, with a sustained downward trend and confidence that new cases are known and counted promptly. Test 2. A national plan for social distancing that includes parameters for both physical distancing and levels of social mixing in schools, as well as appropriate supplies of PPE. Test 3, testing, comprehensive access to regular testing for children and staff to ensure that our schools and colleges don't become hotspots for COVID-19. Test 4, a whole school strategy. Protocols have to be put in place to test a whole school or a college when a case occurs, and for isolation to be strictly followed. And Test 5, protection for the vulnerable. Vulnerable staff and staff who live with vulnerable people should be able to work from home, fulfilling their professional duties to the extent that it's possible, and plans must be there to specifically address the protection of vulnerable parents, grandparents and carers of students who are returning to school as well. Now, I'm in very strong agreement with the test put forward by the National Education Union. That's not trade union thinking, by the way. That's common sense. It's basic common sense that you don't send your students, you don't send your staff, and you don't send your parents through those school gates until you know that they are absolutely safe. We don't want to be putting anyone in harm's way. I can understand why the government wants to get students back into school. I've got a younger brother who's coming to the end of his time at primary school, and already these young people have really been deprived of valuable learning. Many young people have had their exams cancelled, which has really upset the process of moving from secondary school into A-levels and onto university, or even moving from primary onto secondary. And obviously we have to think about those students who are living below the poverty line, who do rely on schools for many of their meals. Obviously the government has a free school meals voucher programme, but that programme has been massively beset by difficulties, with parents getting to the end of the queue in Tesco or Sainsbury's or whatever supermarket they go to, handing over their vouchers and being told they don't work, being humiliated, having to put their food back. And I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, we can keep children off school forever and being out of school isn't going to affect their lives and isn't going to have any difficulty for them and their family, because obviously a lot of people, not just students, but staff, parents, have been massively inconvenienced by the closure of schools. But what I'm saying is, on balance, I think we should be able to send them back when it's safe to send them back, and keep them out of the classroom for as long as is necessary until it is safe. And for those students who do rely on their school for their hot meals, an example, the government needs to urgently fix that free school meals voucher programme. I don't think it's right for the government to completely cock up this programme where schools are struggling to access the system, where parents are being turned away in the supermarket and say, right, we'll send the kids back to school, they can eat there. What we have to say is we'll keep them off and keep them safe in the meantime, and we will also fix this free school meals voucher problem so that they can continue to eat when they're not in school. Now, the right-wing press have made a lot of this. The Sun, the Daily Mail, and all I can say is, behind all those headlines, all the nonsense that we've seen accusing trade unions and teachers of colluding against the government, frustrating the end of lockdown, it's a horrible throwback to all the Brexit debates that we all hated at the end of last year, and all I can say about that from the right-wing press is, gimme a break. I don't care. I don't care what some second-rate journalist behind a screen in the Daily Mail offices say. I care what teachers think. I care what parents think. And I care what students think as well. Those are the only people who should be influencing this discussion, not a second-rate typist behind a screen. So we need to be thinking about that. We need to be having these discussions in a sensible way, and we need to not have those press barons throwing these ridiculous lines at the public, trying to convince everyone that these big bad trade unions are trying to make your lives harder, because at the end of the day, they're not. They're trying to keep teachers safe, they're trying to keep students safe, and we need to be doing that as well. We as people need to look past these headlines, and we need to say, you know what, no, I'm not going to buy into this absolute rubbish coming out of the Daily Mail or the Sun. I'm going to ask my friend who's a teacher what she thinks. I'm going to ask my friend who's a teaching assistant what he thinks. I'm going to ask my friend who's a parent what they think. Now, obviously, the government has their own line on this as well. I want to play some audio for you from Gavin Williamson, the Secretary of State for Education. And he said this last week when he was leading one of the government's press briefings on coronavirus. So just have a quick listen to this for me.
I know a lot of you will be worried about sending your children to school. Every one of us wants the very best for our children. And I know how stressful this time has been for all families right across the country. I want to reassure you that this approach is based on the best scientific advice, with children at the very heart of everything that we do. Education is one of the most important and precious gifts that we can give any child. So when we are advised that we can start to bring some children back to school, we should do so that they don't miss out on the enormous opportunities to learn, to be with their friends, to benefit from everything that their teachers and their schools can offer them. We owe it to the children in order to be able to do that.
Now, I want to look at a particular phrase that Gavin Williamson used there, and I'm not going to lie to you as listeners, I am mad as hell about this, and I'm going to make no attempt to hide it whatsoever, and I know there's going to be many people out there who agree with me. That phrase, we owe it to the children. He said we owe it to the children to send them back to school. Well, here's an idea. Why don't we fund our schools properly? Because since 2011, in the last 10 years of Tory government, more than £7 billion has been slashed from our education budget. Our spending as a representation of GDP, our spending on education fell from 5.69 to 4.7%. That's a total decline of 25%. To give you an idea of what that means for schools and students in our community, in Hertfordshire, after years of government cuts, 442 out of 483 schools in Hertfordshire are still in crisis. That's a shortfall in 2020 of £50.9 million, and per pupil we are losing £286. And you can find this information on the School Cuts website, schoolcuts.org.uk. I just think it's so wrong that we can go years without properly funding our schools and then turn around and say, here's an idea, let's not only send our staff and students back to school at an unsafe time in the middle of a massive pandemic, let's send them back into underfunded schools in the middle of a pandemic. Now, the other thing about this, and you'll have heard it in that statement from Gavin Williamson there, is that the government claims they're being led by the science when it comes to reopening schools. And you'll hear this phrase, this sort of buzzword a lot in statements made by the government, made by the Prime Minister, being led by the science, not by economic necessity. We're being led by the science. Well, my question is this, and I think a lot of parents will be very interested in this as well. If the government is being led by the science when it comes to reopening schools, why is it that they haven't published that scientific advice? If the government is so certain that it's completely safe to be reopening our schools, sending our students and our staff back in through those gates, then I think they should be publishing the scientific advice that would lay to rest the concerns of those parents, teachers and unions. Let me ask you a question, see if you can answer me this. Why is it that we are sending state schools back on the 1st of June, but Eton and other massive private schools are staying closed until September? I think there's not just a question of education and funding, there's a class question here, and it's one that I'm going to come back to on future shows. But if you have a point of view you want to share, you want to agree with me or even disagree with me, get in touch. You can hear my contact details at the start of the show or at the end. Be aware, keep up to date, something I'm really concerned about, obviously, as I have a younger brother and my family members are teachers, so this is an issue that we're going to keep an eye on. Now, the final part of the coronavirus coverage that I want to look at on today's show is actually to do with a petition from the East Herts Green Party. Now, the petition is to Hertfordshire County Council, and it's called Safer Social Distancing on Our Streets. This is a petition that I have signed and I've shared on my social media. I will share it again at the end of the show so that you can take a look for yourself. I won't read out the web address here because it is incredibly long and complicated, but you will be able to find the petition by going to democracy.hertfordshire.gov.uk and searching for Safer Social Distancing on Our Streets. As I say, if you'd rather just go for a link, I will send it out after the show on my social media. But this petition is basically around making sure that the people on our streets can be kept safe during the coronavirus pandemic. Now, this is particularly important as we're seeing more people on our streets. The lockdown is beginning to be loosened. We are seeing some people back at work, particularly in those construction and manufacturing industries, as we spoke about earlier. So ensuring that people can travel safely and can follow social distancing is really important. So the idea behind this petition is calling on the county council to take action to ensure that the increasing number of pedestrians and cyclists can travel safely throughout the county and they don't have to be afraid. They can still practice social distancing appropriately to protect that public health, which is obviously really important. Now, what the petition is also calling on the county council to do on a few specific points is as follows. Use emergency traffic regulation orders to introduce a 20 mile per hour speed restriction in all built up areas. Limiting all unnecessary parking of vehicles on pavements with the exception of permitted loading and unloading to ensure that pedestrians have access to the fullest space available. A temporary widening of pavements and pedestrian areas to ensure that social distancing can be practiced effectively, and the creation of dedicated, physically separated cycle lanes to ensure that cyclists can travel with minimal risk from adjacent vehicles. Now, this is really important for a number of reasons, and I can give you one right now that I'm sure everyone listening is going to be able to relate to. How many times have you been walking out on your daily walk, you've been going along the pavement, sometimes in particularly narrow pavement, and you find yourself face to face with someone coming in the same direction as you, and there's a lot of umming and ahhing, struggling to get round each other, moving back, moving forwards. Inevitably, someone ends up walking in the road to ensure that you can keep that 2 metre distance. Now, maybe in an area like mine, where I live, where there aren't a lot of cars on the roads at the moment, that would be okay, and you can walk out on that road, although obviously still not advisable, still not safe. But if you're in a town centre, Hertford town centre, Welwyn Garden City, wherever across Hertfordshire, wherever in East Herts, it's definitely not safe to walk out onto that road, particularly if it's a main road as well. So it's absolutely vital that we're ensuring there's enough space on our streets, on our pavements, that pedestrians can get by each other without having to take those unsafe steps of stepping into the road. The same is true with cyclists as well. More people are walking and cycling. The government has said as well that more people should be cycling and walking than driving at the moment. And so we need to make sure that those people who are cycling can have that appropriate amount of distance, that they're not having to duck and dive between pavement and road because there's loads of cars flying past or people crossing the streets. We need those cycle lanes, and those speed restrictions are really important as well, so that we can ensure that those larger numbers of people out walking and cycling out on our streets can be kept safe at the moment as well. This petition also speaks to a really important point about protecting our environment and about the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. We're not only facing the public health impacts of the coronavirus, we're seeing an economic impact as well, not just on a national level, on an international level, but on a local level. And in that same way, we have to be thinking about the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic, not just in public health terms, but also in terms of our economy. In the same way that the coronavirus pandemic has had that impact on our local economy, we need to be thinking about a local recovery as well. And what I think would be really positive to see is a greener local economy coming out of the recovery from this. Now, this has been talked about on a national level by political parties and environmental campaigners. I don't think we've had a better opportunity in years to completely level up our economy in terms of how we protect our environment. A lot of the measures talked about in this petition would be really important in building a more environmentally friendly local area, and it's going to play a key role in building a more green local economy going forward as well, ensuring that our towns and our town centres are sustainable in terms of travel. Now, we've talked about this on the show in the past. Hertfordshire County Council encouraging them to divest from fossil fuels and invest in greener forms of energy. This petition from the East Herts Greens as well, as I say, speaks to providing a more sustainable travel. It talks about those greener forms of travel, the ones that people will be using more throughout the coronavirus crisis, and something I think we can do as a local community is continue to encourage greener forms of travel as we go forward. Now, as I say, a fantastic petition by the East Herts Greens, one that I've signed and shared, and you can find it on my social media after the show at Josh Dean Herts, Herts, like the county. Do go sign this petition, do share it, do encourage your friends to sign and share as well. Now, next I want to look at planning developments. We talked about these local planning developments last week. But there have been some changes, there have been some updates on that information, and I want to look at those again because I have asked around, I have asked some questions about this, and I just want to go over them again to give people an idea of what's going on. The first one obviously is Birchley Green. I used to work in Birchley Green, as many of you will know. I've talked about it a lot in the past, and I'm also part of the We Are Hertford campaign, a campaign which was founded to give local people a say on all developments in Hertford, but particularly on Birchley Green, because it brought a number of different groups together, it brought a number of people together who shared concerns about Birchley Green, and what it was about was consolidating our shared reach across the community, our shared concerns, and uniting behind one campaign. So the Birchley Green redevelopment, Chase New Homes, the developer who took over from Wrenbridge, have submitted amendments to their plans for the Birchley Green redevelopment. We talked about this last week. Now a second public consultation is being held. Now this does mean that the development will be pushed back a little bit again. So the start date of the actual building of the development might change a little bit, although Chase New Homes has reiterated their commitment to the site, the commitment to getting it started, because they're aware of the damage this is going to do to our local economy. We've had a hole in our town centre for years now. They want to fill that hole, but they're also conscious of the fact that we need to move ahead quickly because of the effect that the coronavirus pandemic is going to have on our high streets. Now, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what some of the more notable changes are, but I do want to encourage you to go and look at the actual changes and the plans yourself on the East Herts Planning Portal. I'll give you a link to that in a moment. But so the more notable changes: reduction in the number of residential units, 100 down to 98, a change of 2. Reduction in the amount of commercial floor space at ground level. Changes in use for commercial, addition of a roof terrace on Block A, and alterations to elevations. Detailing has been added, including a sort of faux warehouse sort of aesthetic, bridge details, things like that. And that goes along with, the new name for the development. They're calling it Lee Wharf, and it's about sticking with that theme, I suppose, in the design of a sort of wharf. Now, if you want to go and take a look at this for yourself, which I really encourage you to do, in fact, I encourage you not only to take a look at the changes, but I encourage you to submit a comment as well. Now, Chase New Homes have shown that they are willing to listen. They are willing to listen to what local people have to say. When We Are Hertford ran our public meeting at the end of last year, we had over 100 people, probably nearly 200 people in the room. Someone from Chase New Homes was there. We later found out that someone from Chase New Homes was there at our meeting listening to what people said. And they've taken on board comments that have been made in the past as well. So I really encourage you not just to look at the changes in those plans, but also to submit a comment and share your views as well. So, if you want to take a look, go to publicaccess.eastherts.gov.uk/online-applications, and you want to find these plans, the Birchley Green plans, under the planning reference 3/19/2614/FUL. As I say, I encourage you to take a look, submit a comment, share your thoughts as a developer, because it's really important that we, as local people, are sharing our thoughts on what we want our town centre to look like. Now, the next local development that I wanted to look at was the gasworks off Marshgate Drive. Now, we talked about this last week, but to give those who didn't listen to last week's show an idea of what this is all about, the gasworks site off of Marshgate Drive has had a bit of a back and forth. So there's developer St William who wants to build on it. Now, planning permission was initially refused by East Herts Council, and this was due to poor design, overdevelopment, highway issues, so on and so forth. There was a lot of pushback from the local community, people who live nearby. There was a historical interest because of the architecture and a mill nearby, I think it was. So it's been a bit of a saga. Obviously, as I said, East Herts District Council refused the planning application from St William last year. The site in the district plan, the local plan, was earmarked for 200 homes, I think it was. Now, St William wanted to build 375. Council rejected the plans, obviously. St William takes this to the Planning Inspectorate. And the Planning Inspectorate, who agreed our district plan, agreed that that site should be for 200 homes, overturns this decision by the council to reject the planning application. St William are told they can go ahead, and the council has decided they don't want to challenge this decision by the Planning Inspectorate. The first issue that we've obviously got to look at is, why are we doing these district plans if they can be overruled that easily? We have this sort of overarching plan on what we're going to do with our area, how we're going to develop it, and then developers can just appeal and build as many houses as they want. My hope would be that there's some wiggle room here. If we're going to be building 375 houses on a plot marked for 200, why don't we take the number of houses we're building somewhere else down? Hopefully that will help us to circumvent this overdevelopment that we're seeing, and that's something that we want to keep on top of. My other concern was why the council decided not to challenge this. Again, we talked about this last week, but to give you an idea, the council said that following legal advice and after serious consideration, they decided not to challenge the decision of the Planning Inspectorate. And they said that this decision is based on the legal advice received and the likelihood of success. Now, I want a little bit more information, and I think a lot of people who live nearby, who are concerned about the development, who are going to have to deal with the construction, the noise, the heavy goods vehicles, so on and so forth, I think they want a little bit more information too. I think those that campaigned against this development and didn't want such an invasive development on their doorstep deserve some more information as well. I'm not faulting the council for seeking legal advice and coming to a conclusion. I understand that. If they've taken this legal advice, they've come to the conclusion that they couldn't win this case if they challenged it, I understand that. I'm sure other people will be willing to understand that too. But what I am saying is, okay, you've taken this legal advice, can you give us a little bit more? Can you tell us what the legal advice was, or at least give us an idea of what the legal advice was, so that you can put to rest the concerns and the anger of people in the community? Because there will be people who are concerned still, and there will be people that are angry still. But I'm sure there are many, many people who are willing to turn around and say, look, I understand, thank you for telling me, if they had a bit more information. And I think it would go a long ways to building trust in terms of developments, because for too long I've heard people discuss East Herts, discuss our district, our area, and referred to it as a developer's paradise. And I think it would go a long way to building trust, as I say, with the community, if they could have a little bit more information on why this has happened the way that it's happened. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request either. So, again, something that we'll be keeping on top of, again, something that we'll be taking an interest in, and I may have more to update you with in future shows as well. So do keep an eye on that. Now, as we come to the end of the show, I just want to talk about one of the campaigns that I've been speaking about recently, why I wrote to my MP, Julie Marson, about trans rights. And I want to talk about yesterday, which was the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia. Now, I wrote to my MP initially because of comments made by Liz Truss, the Minister for Women and Equalities, about reforming the Gender Recognition Act. And I was concerned about comments she had made about access that trans young people would have to gender reassignment, healthcare and support. And I was concerned about some of the rhetoric I heard her use because I was recognising anti-trans dog whistles in some of what she was saying. Now, what Liz Truss said and some of the reforms that she's proposed have been almost universally panned by trans rights activists and LGBT campaigners, including by members of Liz Truss's own party, the Conservatives. Now, like many allies of the LGBT community, I was concerned about what Liz Truss had said. I have friends who are non-binary who were concerned about the comments that she'd made and the policy that she was allegedly going to try and push through. So I took this opportunity to write to Julie Marson, the MP for Hertford and Stortford, express my concern, ask some questions and ask her to pass on that concern as well to Liz Truss. Now, I did receive a response from Julie Marson to my letter, which was a reasonable response, and I'm not going to share it in full here purely because it's a long letter and I don't really feel comfortable sharing what is essentially private communication, but to give you the bullet points, she did sort of repeat a lot of what government policy is and what the government line is on reforming the Gender Recognition Act, but she did take my concerns in stride, she did address them, and she has agreed to pass on my concerns to Liz Truss as well. And I think it's positive to get that response. Obviously, I'm conscious that repeating the government line, repeating government policy is not necessarily going to align with my own views. I'm still very concerned about what the government may or may not put forward, but I am glad that my concerns are addressed, and I am glad that they will be passed on to Liz Truss as well. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, which we marked yesterday, the 17th of May. I believe this is in its 30th year now. I think this was the 30th anniversary, and it's about members and allies of the LGBT community coming together and acknowledging that this kind of vicious hatred has no place in our society, but also celebrating our friends in the LGBT community, acknowledging what they bring to our lives and to our society as well. Now, this year's theme was breaking the silence and encouraging members of the LGBT community to be able to stand up and speak out about their experiences, about who they are. And something it talks about on the International Day's website is that it's not just a single campaign, it's a moment when thousands of ideas and initiatives converge on a single vision, freedom and equality for all people of all sexual orientations, genders and bodily minorities as well. So it's really, really important that we mark that each year. And I was thinking a lot yesterday about the letter that I sent to Julie Marson, thinking about the potential reforms to the GRA and why it's more important than ever that we stand up for our friends who are transgender, that we stand up for those in our communities and in our country who might be feeling worried, who might be concerned about what the government is proposing. So that's something that was really firmly in my mind yesterday as well. Obviously a really important day, obviously something that's really important that we mark each year, especially when we consider those many, many countries around the world where it is still illegal to marry in the same gender, where same-sex relationships are still illegal, and that's something we have to continue to challenge. We don't just have to think about our own country, where obviously there are still strides that need to be made in terms of proper equality, but we need to think about the other countries around the world that haven't taken those steps yet as well, and it's about standing shoulder to shoulder, in solidarity with members of the LGBT community, and that's something that's really important. Just before we come to the end of the show, we're at the very end of the show now as well, I just wanted to talk about what we're marking today and what the significance of this week is. So today is the start of Mental Health Awareness Week. If you've listened to shows by myself or even by other members of the team on East Tarts Radio in the past, mental health, mental well-being is an issue we're really conscious of, and it's one that in particular I'm really passionate about. When I was younger, I was with Teen Voice UK running campaigns on mental health awareness, promoting mental well-being. I've been really lucky to work with, on behalf of Teen Voice UK, Just Talk, the County Council's youth mental health campaign. It's an issue that I'm really passionate about. And as I say on East Tarts Radio, it's one that we've talked about in the past. This week's Mental Health Awareness Week is around the theme of kindness. And I think this is probably going to be one of the most important mental health awareness weeks that has ever been run, because it's right in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. It's right in the middle of a lot of uncertainty, a lot of instability, and I'm sure that there's many, many people out there who have felt the impact on their mental health as a result of the coronavirus pandemic as well. And I will level with you, and I'll be honest, because that's what I try to do on this show. I've struggled as well during the coronavirus pandemic. I've struggled during lockdown, not just because it's a change to my routine of getting up every day and going to work. Obviously, I'm on furlough at the moment, but it's a change in not being able to go outside as much, not being able to partake in those activities that I really enjoy. It is a struggle not being able to see friends, not being able to see my girlfriend at the moment. Missing the people that we see regularly and see on a regular basis. So yeah, it has been a bit of a struggle, and I have focused on tips online, finding information online, sort of materials that can help you keep track of your mental health and keep on top of your mental health. And it is important to be able to reach out. And I understand that it can sometimes be difficult, but reaching out can be so important. And whether that is reaching out and telling someone that you're struggling, or it's just reaching out and looking for a conversation. You know, an example would be that I had a really good chat with my dad the other day over the phone, and that helped me just to feel a bit more connected and feel a little bit less trapped. I think it is a little bit about feeling trapped indoors, feeling stuck indoors, not being able to get out. You know, the lockdown has that effect on people. It's certainly had it on me. But being able to reach out is really important. As I say, this week is probably going to be one of the most important mental health awareness weeks that's been run because of the situation that we're currently in. And I really encourage people to get involved on social media, get involved online. You can find more information, obviously, on the mental health website, mentalhealth.org.uk. And if you want the specific page, it's mentalhealth.org.uk/campaigns/mental-health-awareness-week. You can also find stuff under the hashtag on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, so on and so forth. Hashtag Mental Health Awareness Week or hashtag MHAW2020. Do get involved. Share some stuff online about how to cope with your mental health during the coronavirus crisis. Share some stuff about getting involved and speaking out and promoting discussion around mental health. It's really important that we end the stigma around talking about our mental health, and I think that's something that's going to be really important at the moment as well, ending that stigma around talking about our mental health and about mental illnesses. Do get involved online, do share some stuff on social media. It would be fantastic to have discussions with people about this as well. And if you want to get involved on the show in the near future, we can come back to this next week and do a recap of what was discussed during Mental Health Awareness Week. Do get in touch. You can hear my contact details and the station's contact details at the end of the show. It would be fantastic to hear from you. And just on that point that we raised earlier around what's happening in our mental health hospitals, you know, Mental Health Awareness Week, I want to take a look into this as well. And so I will be finding someone to write to, as I said earlier, to find out what is going on in our mental health hospitals, find out what the situation is after that story that we talked about last week in regards to the rise in cases of the coronavirus and rise in numbers of deaths in our mental health hospitals. So as I say, get involved in Mental Health Awareness Week, get involved online, keep promoting, keep talking, and help to end the stigma, and be kind, which is more important than ever at the moment. Be kind. We're right at the end of the show now, so I just briefly wanted to take this opportunity to tell you how you can get in touch and get involved in the show as well. I've been really lucky to speak to some people in the local community about the issues we've looked at on the show, not just the coronavirus and the lockdown, but also about these planning developments we've looked at as well. And I'm always keen to hear from people and hear what you think, and that's whether you agree with me or disagree with me. I'm more than happy for people to get in touch, have discussions and disagree with me, and we can have an actual interesting discussion and debate, and I'm never going to turn someone away who disagrees with me just because they disagree with me. I think there's too much of that these days. I think there's too much of this sort of situation where if someone disagrees with you, you just ignore them, and I don't think that's right. I think you should always try and discuss and debate with the people you don't agree with, because it might help you to sort of open your eyes a little bit and hear different perspectives. So if you do want to get in touch about the show, you can either get in touch with East Herts Radio, so that's at East Herts Radio on social media, or email studio@easthertsradio.co.uk. Or if you want to get in touch with me personally, you can find me on social media at Josh Dean Herts, Herts, like the county. Or you can email me at josh@joshdean.uk. It'd be fantastic to hear from you, fantastic to have a bit of a discussion and debate, and we might be able to get people on the show in the near future as well. Through the technical wizardry of Zoom, I'm hoping that I'll be able to host some roundtable discussions about the issues we've talked about the coronavirus lockdown, and about all kinds of other things as well. So that's something to keep in mind too. We're right at the end of the show now. I hope you'll tune in again next week. I'll be back on the air, same time, next Monday. Do get in touch using those contact details if you want to. I've been Josh Dean, this has been East Herts Radio, and you've been listening to Talking with Josh Dean in Lockdown.